Recording in progress. So welcome to Lecture 5. Today is our environment lighting. So Project 5 will become Project 6. Project 6 is materials. So we will add materials to what we light in the environment. Project 6 one scene will become Project 7. Which is when we get into texturing. So a lot of people have confusion over the difference between materials and textures. Textures are the visible patterns, the thing that makes wood look like wood, the thing that makes fabric look like fabric, the different colors, the different patterns, the different design schemes that you can't get with a single color. Whenever you have something that requires multiple colors, you need a texture. So for example, on our wall here, I don't know if I can even swing my computer around. Well, I can a little bit and everything just fell off. But you guys can see here, this fabric on the wall, that requires a texture because that is a visible pattern. And that is also multiple colors. So when you have multiple colors and you have a visible texture pattern, you need a texture map to describe it. A material property is what makes something look shiny, what makes something look dull, what makes something look like glass, what makes it look like metal, what makes it look like plastic. And those we want to learn about separately because just like lighting, where we light with flat gray, we don't want to be distracted when we are adding materials by multiple colors. So the whole idea is we focus on what is essential and not add things that are not essential. So we build it up in layers. So today, you will be doing 2 environments. You'll be doing a day and a night. Now, one of your environments has to be an interior and the other has to be an exterior. So in the end, you will do a day scene, and whichever you choose to do, whether you choose to do the exterior or the interior, will decide what you do for the night. So the night has to be the opposite time of day, opposite environment. So if you do interior day, you must do exterior night. If you do exterior day, you must do interior night. And then you will get a chance to do a comp on your own. You'll find a reference image on the internet that you can use of an environment of something that you want to recreate, the look and feel of. Just like with our other exercises, you're going to be using one of our scene files and we provide the templates for you. So you'll also be doing one, what we call my comp. Now, in your environments, each environment will have 2 renders. One will be what we call a long shot, basically kind of an establishing environment shot, and the other will be a close-up of an area in that environment. So for example, for the interior day here, I got little thumbnails, right? Our long shot is pretty much of this living room. Then we have a close-up of the corner. which gives us some more detail. So for the exterior, we have this kind of broad environment. And by the way, this exterior is here on Full Sail. That is what we call the Zen Garden, and that is behind building 4D. And there's a little patio, well, actually, it's quite a big patio back there where, you know, if you're on campus, go there, take a look at the actual environment, take pictures of it. I've got photos of it that Frank used to model this. And Frank, your lab instructor, modeled both of these for us. He did a really good job. So this is our Zen Garden here at Full Sail. So we have a long shot. Notice there is nothing on the table. When you do your close-up, I've got the table setting on a separate display layer. So you turn that display layer on so that it is visible in the close-up shot. This is only for the lighting. You'll have that table setting on for the rest of your projects. It's just for the lighting, we're just interested on focusing. Basically for the lighting, I used the photo that I took of the environment and the time of day. It was basically 10:30 in the morning in November. And that's the time of day that the sun gave us the shadow and the length, and I liked it, and that's why we took the picture. So for the nighttime, you've got the same set of long shot close-up. It's just different time of day. Okay. So just kind of a broad overview of where we're going with the next couple of projects. So office hours, I'll have office hours Thursday, 10 to 4 p.m., which is tomorrow. Frank and or Ari will be doing the online Zoom Open Lab. It's optional. Optional for campus and online students. We'll still have Discord going on, but this gives a chance if you have anything screen share intensive, it's a perfect place to go. If you just have a question, pop into Discord. It's really simple. We can even do a screen share in Discord, but when we have multiple people, Discord's not really that friendly for multiple screen shares. Not as powerful or robust as Zoom. So that will be 1 to 5. Don't forget, all times here at Full Sail are Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Savings Time, whichever we're in. All right, so our agenda, interior lighting, what the camera sees, how we interpret camera exposure, how the camera lets light in, how it differs from our eyes, which is kind of important. Exterior lighting, same kind of deal. Time of day, shadow length is very important on interior and exterior. Remember, time of day, shadow length, that determines where your key light is, where you see the shadows. Even though we're dealing with an environment, we're still dealing with light direction, light intensity, light color, which today will change from just adding color to the light to what's called color temperature, and then shadow quality. So that kind of leads right into color temperature. We're going to be dealing with dome lights since we are dealing with an environment. Dome lights allow us to place an image, a high dynamic range image into it, and that adds to the environment by providing us with light and color information into our scene. Sort of like when you are looking out the window at, say, sunset or sunrise. You got either a nice kind of orangey, purpley sky or maybe a reddish sky, right? That light actually is in the environment. And that's where our dome light image comes from. That allows us to do what's called high dynamic range IBL, image-based lighting. Now, whenever we use dome lights, if we are in an interior environment, letting light from the outside into a closed environment like this room, we've got windows, we've got, door portals. If we were to turn all the lights off in here, we would still get light coming in through those windows. So we use what are called portal lights to take dome light information and funnel it into a specific area. Because with a dome light, it's just a big ball that provides light in all directions. When you have an environment inside, windows, you have closed walls, you have closed roof, closed floor, you don't need 360 degrees of light coming in. You only need it coming in where the openings are. And that means we can channel that energy from the dome through the portals, which makes the light more efficient. We don't have to calculate all the noise and all the bounce light on 360 degrees. Now, when we are dealing with artificial lighting, we will be dealing with mesh lights. Artificial, I don't think I spelled that right, but pretend I spelled that right. All right, mesh lights. Whenever you have modeled light bulbs, modeled lamp fixtures, you've got, for example, in our room here, we've got these little LED strips. They are visible to us. They provide us with light. We've also got lights in the ceiling, recessed lights in the back there. I've got them on. I have them turned off up here so we can see the projector better. But those recessed lights in the ceiling are visible to us, and they also provide light. So that's where we would use mesh lights. That would be modeled in an environment, and then we would assign what's called a mesh light to the geometry that turns the geometry from just being a normal piece of geometry that reflects light back into a light emitting surface. So mesh lights, really good for that. And then we want to make sure that we've got color management turned on, as always. Should always check that so you get accurate results. All right, any questions before we get started? Adriana, Daya, everybody good? How about here? Allegra, Diamond, L, Griffin, any questions? Griffin's good, thank you. L's good, thank you. Allegra, not yet. Okay. So let's go on. All right, so a couple pictures that I took here. On the left side, this was done with a digital single lens reflex camera, not your standard iPhone or smartphone. On the right, I took this with phone camera. What I wanted to do was take a picture and have the camera exposure set for the outside, meaning I wanted the outside. In this case, this is an interior environment. This was my living room or my family room. I was standing in there. I looked out the window with my eyes. That's the amount of light that I saw, the light intensity that I saw. So I set the camera up for that manually. Everything here was manual. Manual exposure, manual color balance, manual shutter speed, manual aperture, meaning the opening. Everything was set up to make the outside look good. Now, when I took the picture, outside looked great, compared it to what I saw to what the picture looked like. But I realized that this was too dark or underexposed. So trouble is, when I looked at it with my eyes could look outside the window. I saw this amount of light. But when I looked in the environment, I saw this amount of light. So this would be the correct exposure. But the trouble with that with the camera is outside here becomes overexposed. Meaning it's too bright. So with a camera, you kind of can't have both worlds like you can with your eyes. Now, in photos, we are used to seeing this kind of balance between inside lighting and outside. If you want the detail to focus on the inside, you set your camera up so that the lighting looks natural inside, and you let the outside, the window, anything outside the window kind of blow out, look overexposed. All right, so on the right, everything is auto here, auto exposure, auto color balance, auto focus, camera on your phone, you just point and shoot. So in the inside, I let my phone come up to, kind of adjustment for the interior lighting. And even though it's during the day, you go somewhere like Denny's or you go to a small place to eat and you sit down and they always have lights on inside. All right, so inside, this part looks normal. Outside here, though, it looks overexposed. So then I took my camera, my phone, set it on the windowsill or close to the window, let it adjust to the light level outside. So now the outside looks natural, but the inside is underexposed. And again, it doesn't matter whether you do it manually or you do it with automatic settings for everything. You're still going to get the same result. I mean, you can see this is basically, here's the same car that there is here. And you can see there's the tree. Where was it? Yeah, pretty sure this is it. Looks like I had the camera a little higher here to get the whole environment and then a little bit lower to get this. But this is basically here and this is here. So you can see I have no detail in the sky on the left, but I have plenty of detail on the right. So the point I'm trying to drive home is most of the photos you see on the internet are going to be set up for the environment itself to look good, and they're not concerned with how things look outside. Now, having said that, you may go somewhere and work where you're doing some kind of stylized animation or you're working on a game, and they want everything to look good. That is an artistic decision. That's perfectly valid. That's doable. You can do that with high dynamic range images on a camera, and you have to do a lot of tweaking in Photoshop or Lightroom. But it is valid. You can do it. For us, we are dealing with simple photos, which will be what most of your reference is going to be from. So we're going to adjust the light. So during the day inside, it looks good. Outside's going to be overexposed. It's going to blow out. All right, does that kind of make sense? Any questions? Questions, anybody? Okay, Griffin, makes sense. All right, thank you. Let's clear this. So here is kind of a standard image that you would find off the internet, or you might even take on your own. So this photo it looks like it's a very open environment, lots of windows, very bright, letting a lot of light in through those windows. Now, in CG, this is where we're going to start to figure out, okay, what would we do in CG to be the equivalent of what we see in this photo? Sort of like what we did with the portrait guide. We sat down, we figured out, okay, this is what the photographer did. Now, what do we do in CG? What kind of lights do we use? What kind of settings do we use? So anytime you've got sunlight coming in, sunlight during the day is going to be your driving force. That is going to be your main light source during the day, whether you're inside or inside with open windows visible, having light outside, or you're outside directly, standing in the environment. So the sun, that is our direct source of illumination. That provides you with shadows, that provides you with the bulk of the light. Now, so I've got these in red here, where you can see the direct light coming in. Now, the black represents kind of the bounce light, those black arrows. Light hits a surface in the environment inside and then bounces off of there into the rest of the environment. Now, in addition to the sun, we've also got sky, right? Not all the light hits Earth directly. Some of it gets, dissipated or diffused in our atmosphere with the different levels and layers of gas as the light comes through. We also have moisture layers, or, areas in our atmosphere that have a lot of moisture, clouds. So they diffuse the light even more. And for that, that is indirect light. So we have directional light coming through the windows that hits objects inside the environment directly. And then we have kind of light streaming in from the rest of the environment. That could be represented by, light bouncing off of buildings, cars, trees, ground, anything that's outside that light would bounce off of and then make its way in through the window. So in addition to direct light coming in, we kind of have light streaming in through our windows, pouring in kind of in all directions. It's very diffused. This is where we use a dome light to get that information. Now, dome light's going to provide us with light. We put an image in it, it's going to provide us with color information. So what's outside the window? Well, kind of looks like we're hitting a lot of greenery outside the window. That's going to bring some green color in. You might see some browns. You might see some other warm colors coming in through the window. But since we have what are called portals, we have doors, we have windows that provide information or light, color, energy from outside, we use portal lights to focus that dome light. So the portal lights look like area lights, but they are attached to the dome light. And it's a kind of a different process to make them. So our portal lights are going to sit outside, aim their light inside, and the light they get and the color and everything comes from the dome. So the dome kind of acts like the master. The portals are really kind of slaves. So for this, we would be using portal lights. And however many openings or windows you have, you would use that many portal lights. Because even though a window may not be visible to the camera, it would still provide light into the environment. So we've even got some outside the room here. But that would probably come through maybe as a portal, maybe not. Now, in addition to this, if this scene or environment is modeled correctly, we may have lights or windows that are off camera. Now, how do we know this? Well, kind of like the same way we were figuring out where the light elevation and position was by looking at the eye of the portrait model. Here we've got little bright specular highlights on our globe lights on the ceiling here. And you can see there are pretty nice little visible highlights that look like they're coming from other windows on the opposite side. Now, it could be there are no windows, but maybe the photographer set up a whole bunch of lights to mimic it. Either way, it's valid. It doesn't matter. Definitely, we're getting some light coming from off camera to the right. So portal lights we use to kind of funnel that dome light energy when we are in an interior environment. Now, that by no means takes care of all our lighting. You know, most people think, oh, okay, good, directional light, dome light, portal lights, done. Not necessarily. There are times in CG when we don't get enough bounce light energy into our environment. So for example, we've got a huge amount of energy hitting this door. Okay, then that bounces off the door. Notice that the door color is completely gone. It's blown out. There's so much energy hitting it that it just washes it out. So that acts actually like a bounce card. So it bounces light off of there onto the wall. The wall is blown out also. So now the wall is going to act like a secondary bounce card. So then it's going to bounce on the floor, it's going to bounce up to the ceiling, and it's going to start to dissipate. But a lot of times in CG, we may get really good light here, but we may not get enough energy on the wall bouncing into the environment. So that is a good place for an area light. Area light being a broad surface of light to mimic either a bounce card like we did with the portrait, or to just mimic a, not necessarily an opening, but a broad surface that reflects light back. That kind of makes sense? Makes sense? Anybody out there in Zoom land? Jasmine's good, thank you. Elle's good, all right, awesome. Welcome, Damien. All right, so walls, floors, ceilings, all great uses for an area light that has a lot of light bouncing off of it. Because remember, in CG, we don't get a one-to-one energy transfer, ever. I don't care how good your rendering engine is or your real-time engine, we just don't have the horsepower, especially in laptops, to calculate all that bounce light. All right, so now let's move on to interior nighttime. Interior nighttime, the sun is no longer your main light source. Now, some people say, well, what about the moon? The moon will provide, the moon is not really a light source. The moon is really a big giant bounce card in the sky, big giant bounce ball, because sunlight hits it, it reflects off the surface, and then those light rays make it to Earth. That gives you an idea of how much energy the sun, exudes or, transmits. It hits that surface with such energy, it glows at night. And on a really bright moon in a clear sky, you can see your shadows on the ground. Now, I don't know if you could necessarily read a book by it. There's not that much light, but there's plenty of light. But for the most part, anything we see outside the window is basically what we call practical effect. It's meant to be there for visual usage, but doesn't really provide necessary light or relevant information in your scene. So when you see lights in a movie set or maybe a TV show, they turn lights on, those lights really aren't illuminating the entire set. They look good and they tell the story. Whereas in reality, they probably got very bright lights being focused right where they need them. So for our dome light, that's just going to provide us with information or visible environment outside the window. It's not going to provide that much energy. Think of, go into a room, you got windows open, no lights are on. You can still step on the dog, step on the cat, stub your toe, step on, a Lego. If you've got siblings or kids, step on a Lego. It doesn't really provide super amount of information. The main light source for interior night's going to come from artificial ones. Those artificial light sources are going to be our mesh lights. Mesh lights are going to be the modeled pieces of geometry. Like we talked about with our room here, we've got these LED strips, we've got recessed lights in the ceiling. You go outside in the hallway, Full Sail's got lights up and down the halls, on the walls, in the ceiling. Now, in our environment here, we've got a lamp. This lamp is providing most of the light information in our environment here. So this lamp is providing light because it's got a hole in the top of the shade. It's providing a little bit of light up top here. But most of the energy is going to be sent downward. So this one little light is going to provide a lot of information in our scene. So that's probably going to be maybe, at least a 100-watt light bulb to be able to illuminate that. Maybe more. Now, visually, I'm sure whoever took this photo, decided, well, I got this area on the right side, this whole entertainment center would blend right into the background. What they did was, it looks like they took a light, stuck it on the floor, looks like a bare light bulb actually, stuck it on the floor, and that helps to kind of add a little visual interest and separate this whole area from the background. So it just makes the room look like it has more depth. So mesh lights, light bulbs, lamps, if they've been modeled correctly, the good news is you don't have to worry about light direction. It's there. It's modeled into the environment. A lamp on a, hanging from the ceiling, or a lamp on a table, that's a fixed object in your environment. If it's modeled correctly, hey, that's where the light's coming from. That's the good news. You don't have to kind of guess. Now, when we get outside, we've got no barriers. There are no windows, no doors. You walk outside, you are in the environment surrounded by the sky, and you've got direct sunlight on you if the sun is out. Now, if the sun is not out, you got a cloudy, overcast day, you're still getting light from the sun, but it's being diffused and dispersed through the clouds, and it makes it really hard to see your shadows. But on an average kind of sunny day, morning, afternoon, before the storms hit in Florida, you can usually go outside, and for one thing, your sun is going to be your main light source, and your dome light is going to be your environment. That's going to provide you with color information, with some light information for the light that surrounds the environment, which is our sky and trees, buildings, anything else. Now, the sun is going to determine the time of day. Long shadows, as you can see here, 10:30 a.m. in the morning or 2 p.m. in the afternoon, the shadows are kind of similar in length. When the sun is directly overhead, that's usually noontime. That's usually when shadows are tucked right underneath of your object. Straight down light. All right, so for this example, right, this is the Zen garden that we talked about earlier. This is building 4D. Right behind it, this is the actual table that we had modeled, that Frank modeled for us for today's exercise. So I stuck my travel mug here just to get a picture of shadow length. Over here, this is behind building 4B. This is the 3D arts kind of patio out there. Anybody's been in building 4B? Right behind it, there's that little patio area. Right near the art rooms, the animation rooms in building 4B. So roughly same shadow quality here. Now you'll notice that even though the shadows are fairly long, they are not soft. They're not super soft. The sun does not have super soft shadows until it's really low in the sky, either really early morning or really late evening. Sort of like this. So these shadows are a little softer. This was roughly 6:30 in the evening in August. So the sun's kind of low, not to the point where it's going to start to change the light color, but it's really low, and the shadows are a little softer, but they're not super blurry like most people kind of recall them being. So always use reference when you're trying to create anything, because you want to make sure you're as accurate as possible. Time of day does affect shadow length, but you need to be careful that you don't kind of stylize the shadows. You create what's accurately there. So this is our Zen garden. Pay attention to the shadow length. It's the same kind of process that we had here, right? This is photo. This is CG. The sun is still going to cast shadows. Now, in the evening, like really close to dusk, the sun is super low, so you're not going to get a lot of indirect or bounce light in your environment. You're going to see a lot of things in silhouette. You'll see buildings in silhouette. You'll see trees. That's basically because the sun is providing a backlight to everything. So very little direct or indirect light. Lots of silhouette. Even at night, you walk outside, even if there's no moon, the sky is always going to be a little bit brighter than the environment. You'll still be able to see vague outlines of buildings and trees when you look against the sky. Now, when we get into exterior nighttime, you're dealing almost entirely with artificial lighting. Walk outside full sail at night. Inside, it's almost impossible to tell what time of day it is because we got these artificial lights, and you're in here 24 hours and you can't figure out what day it is, what week it is, what's up, what's down. Your head's spinning, but you're having fun. And then you walk outside and it's nighttime. So nighttime, you're going to have lights in the parking lot. You're going to have lights outside the buildings to kind of guide you to your car. You're going to have street lights. You have a party outside, you're going to have artificial lights on. Now, most of the time with artificial lighting, if you've got, say, for example, a small, you're having like a nighttime party or something, you're going to have a lot of little lights all around. You're not going to have just one big giant light. For one thing, a lot of times those big giant lights draw a lot more bugs than the little ones do. So you'll have lots of small lights that will provide you with your illumination. That doesn't mean you won't have maybe a light on the porch behind you, or maybe there's a street light close by that's overhead. But in your small environment, table setting, for example, here, you've got a little bunch of little, they look like tea lights, those really small little candles. Most of the time, they're going to be, hardly anybody burns candles anymore. I mean, some people do, but most of the time they're LED candles, just because it's a lot more, they don't throw as much heat, especially in the summer, and, they're cheaper and little less dangerous. So that's sort of what we have going on for the nighttime scene in the Zen garden, right? We're going to have these little LED candle flames on top of these candles that are going to provide the focus for the table setting. All right, so that's kind of an overview. Interior, day, night, exterior, day, night. Just to kind of give you an idea of where the main light sources are coming from. Remember, during the day, sun's going to drive everything, interior, exterior. You're going to have a dome light. If you're inside, you're going to have portal lights. If you're outside, you don't need portals because you don't have openings. Everything's open. At night, interior, and you can see outside, you're still going to have a dome light, but that light is really going to provide just dim images. Maybe some lit buildings, some street lights, depends on where it is. Outside, it's going to be all artificial lights for the most part. All right. Any questions before we talk about color temperature? Everybody good? Damien, you got any questions? Dea? Well, that's going to be a little bit different. That's going to provide your main light for the most part. Now, you may have bug zappers all around you. That'll provide a little bit of light, but they're mostly there to draw the insects away from the fire. And the fire is usually going to keep insects away also. But that's more or less going to be your main light source. So that would be, think of that as being like, if you were in a room and you had a bright overhead light, that was your main light source. That's kind of the equivalent of camping outside. That's your main light source. Everybody gathers around it. You eat, you talk, you get warm, you keep the bugs away, whatever you're doing, that's going to be your main light source. Now, again, granted, you may have a candle, you may have a lantern or something around you, but that fire is going to provide a little, quite a bit of light. And for that would definitely have to be, if you're doing a single frame, that would have to be modeled the way you want the flames to look. And then you'd have to do some visual effects. You probably have to do some volumetric effects like smoke, just some bloom for the camera so it doesn't look like everything's got really crisp edges. If you're doing an animation and you've actually got, a bunch of frames to do, that's going to be a simulation, sort of like what we did with the bunny burn in the Unreal project. So you calculate how many frames you need, you set the simulation up to run, you capture it, you render it, it's all there. Now, the difference between doing it in the real world and doing it as a simulation, in a simulation, you're probably going to need a light to simulate the flames. The flames are just going to be visual effects. but you need a light to actually provide the illumination that a fire would. That kind of makes sense? All right, so Jasmine's good. Allegra, any questions? Diamond, L, Griffin. Griffin's good, thank you. All right, Diamond's good, awesome. All right, so let's talk about color temperature. So color temperature is the way we measure the color of light. I should say the color that the light emits. It's not like it's added color on top of the light itself, like it was with the portrait guide where the photographer put gels or clear colored plastic in front of the lights to color the light. So lights are going to emit either a warm color or a cool color, depending on what their origin is. Now, we measure light in what are called degrees or Kelvin degrees. Now, does anybody know why we call it Kelvin? It's probably reaching back to high school physics. No. Kelvin was a physicist. I believe 19th century. He found that when he took small blocks of carbon and heated them, they glowed different colors at different temperatures. And that became a standard. He did a whole bunch of tests. And he found that the warmer a color was, meaning temperature-wise, the cooler the color looked. So the same kind of thing exists in a match flame. If you think about a match flame. So let me see if we can get this. Let's go images. All right, so right here, notice you've got this kind of whitish light. You've got this kind of reddish light, but down here, you've got blue. Now, if anybody's ever done, as a kid, you take your finger, you run it through the candle. If you've never done that, don't do it. I don't condone it, but you put your finger through the flame quickly. You don't leave it there. Put it through quickly through this part, and that's the coolest part of the flame, that white. Get in here to the red. Actually, the red, kind of little bit of that halo outside, that's even cooler than the white. So you've got the coolest part, which is the outer part of the flame. It gets warmer. By the time you get to the blue, that's the hottest part. That's about 10,000 degrees Kelvin, which is, I don't even know how that translates into Celsius or, centigrade or Fahrenheit, but really hot. Let's put it that way. So you get an idea, just taking a look at that, how color temperature works. In Chapter 8, The Art and Science of Color, Jeremy Byrne lays out a really good diagram of different color temperatures that kind of correspond to the type of lights that we use every day. Now you'll notice he's got match flame, candle flame. They're right about 17, somewhere between 1500 and 2000. So sun at sunrise, you get into tungsten light, quartz lights, fluorescent lights, tungsten. They're all around between 2000 and 3000. You start getting into the sun, then you're kind of jumping up into the 5000 degree temperature range. So between 5,000 and I'd say 5,000 and 7,000 is kind of the normal color temperature range for the sun. Most software packages start the color temperature at 6,500 degrees. RenderMan does it, Arnold does it, V-Ray does it. That's fairly neutral white light. Think of the sun at noon. Now, as you go up, the light starts to get cooler visually. It starts to get hotter temperature-wise, but cooler visually. So you get between 8,000, 10,000, you're looking at a very cool, kind of pale bluish environment. Get down around 6,500, that's average normal sun. And if you go look at lights, you go to a big box store, you go to Publix, you go to Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, wherever you go get light bulbs, you look on the side of the package, it will tell you the color temperature of the light bulb. And most lights are somewhere between, I'd say 3,500 and maybe 5,000 degrees. That's the color temperature. You'll see, cool bright light or bright white. That'll usually be close to 6,000. You'll see warm color. That's usually about 3,800 or below. But whenever they say warm, think lower temperature, even though the color is going to be more towards orange, reds. And when you see cooler, think higher color, higher temperature, cooler looking color. All right, we'll make sense of this when we actually start using it. Because today we're going to start using color temperature rather than just adding color to the light itself. That light color is going to stay white. But we click on a color temperature tab, and that is going to give us the ability to change it. And you're going to change it visually based off of your reference. All right, now we talked a little bit about dome lights, portal lights. We'll get into those when I demo, but I just want to kind of go over the basic properties, where you get them before we actually do it. So dome lights, portal lights are in the Arnold shelf. That's the easiest way to create them. So this dome light kind of looks like a wireframe sphere. It's right in the light line right here. So this will create a huge dome that will surround your entire environment. It is meant to look like it's infinitely large. Most of the time, we will plug an image into it. If you don't plug an image into it, it will be default white. Look like the matrix. So we use HDR images, high dynamic range images, that allow us to add color and be able to get light intensity information off of that image. That's why we use high dynamic range, because they have more range than a standard JPEG or TIFF or PNG or even a Targa. Scaling translation for this light is generally ignored because it is meant to look like it's infinitely far away. It'd be one of those deals where it looks the same until you actually go through the actual dome itself. The only thing that really matters is rotation. You can rotate the dome so that the image in your dome light matches the environment background you want in the camera. So dome light's really simple to make. Click a button, you got a dome light, wraps around your entire scene. Now, if you are doing an indoor environment, you've got closed walls, ceilings, floors, kind of like we have down here. Let's change color. So right here. This is our interior environment. So we got walls, we got floors, we got ceilings, and we have openings. Now, a dome light would normally surround this. Well, dome light will surround it 360 degrees, but we don't need all 360 degrees of information. That's a waste of computer power, resources, because you're calculating things that aren't seen to the camera or even affected because of the environment. So what we do is we use what are called portal lights. So in order to create a portal light, you have to select the dome, create a portal, and the portal will know, since you have the dome selected, where to attach itself to. So you create as many portals as you have window openings. So for example, this is our interior environment. We got 1, 2, 3, and then there's a fourth one back here on the other side. So we create a portal light, scale it, looks like an area light, but a little bit different. We scale it, place it outside so it aims in. And now the image and intensity will come through that portal. So basically, we're just confining the calculations of that 360-degree dome light down to only the areas we need. So very simple. Right next to the portal light or the dome light icon on the right, you'll see kind of looks like a little white rectangle inside that wire sphere. That is your mesh or portal light icon. Now, mesh lights, very simple. There is a downside to the mesh lights, though. Mesh lights are great in Arnold, but the one downside is if you have multiple meshes or objects that you want to assign the same light to. So for example, here in our room, we've got all these little LED strips. All right, it would be really stupid to assign a separate mesh light to each one of those and have 12 or 15 controls when you could just put them all under one light control. You'd rather have this entire room be controlled by one set of light attributes. Doesn't make sense. Now, some software packages like V-Ray and RenderMan will allow you to just multiple select and assign a mesh light. Arnold will not let you do that. Arnold requires you to select all the meshes together and combine them into one shape node. So you have to select your multiple meshes, combine them, and then you use that combined set of meshes to assign the mesh light to. Then you have one control that will take care of multiple meshes. Little messy, a little confusing, but that's just the way Arnold works. So in our interior, like our exterior here, we've got 4 little meshes for the flames. We got one here, one here, one here, and then there's another one off camera over here. So you have to select all those little LED flame meshes, combine them into one, and then assign a mesh to the combined. So you have intensity, color temperature, all the normal light controls that you would have. And again, a mesh light simply says to the renderer, this surface no longer is reflective. It doesn't have an AI standard surface or even a Lambert assigned to it. It doesn't reflect light back, it emits light. Now in our interior, we've got like a bunch of recessed lights in the ceiling. So they all need to be selected, combined, and then you assign a mesh. We've got right here, we've got 4 arms of this lamp. They will all have the same mesh light. So you need to select all the bulbs in that lamp, then assign a mesh. The TV, that's pretty simple because that is a single object. The TV screen. So you click on that surface and you assign a mesh light. This is all very similar to what we did in Project 1 for you guys already. We had the interior, that bedroom scene at night. So then we've got a table lamp over here. We've also got computer on. So there's a bunch of chances to have single mesh lights, but you also have multiples that you have to deal with too. So really simple, select the geometry, click on the mesh light icon, bang, it is now a mesh light. But the real big but comes when you want to have one mesh light on multiple objects. You need to combine the objects first. And we'll go through that. All right, let's talk a little bit about high dynamic range images. We've already talked a bit about them. But I just want to kind of drive home why we use high dynamic range images. High dynamic range images basically have enough information that we can use for lighting, but the image format itself is what's kind of really amazing. A standard RGB image off the internet is what's called a 24-bit image. Okay, each channel of the RGB has 8 bits of information. So 8 bits of information is equivalent to roughly 256 levels of gray between absolute black and absolute white. Think of those as, a little chart of individual little pixels. Whereas a high dynamic range image has 32 bits per channel, which is a whole lot more information than just 8 bits of information. So 8 bits at 256, that comes up to, anybody really good at math, you can save me, but let's see, 256. I think it's cubed or Yeah, might be cubed. All right, so if 8 is 256, 256, yeah. So what is that? So it's roughly 4 billion levels of information between absolute black and absolute white. It's like 4,294,967 because each channel can have 32 bits of information. You can have multiple channels. There are, I don't think there's a channel limit for an EXR or an HDR file. It's just whatever kind of information you need. Now, that much information allows us to use images for lighting because there's that much information in them. So theoretically, the way HDR images were done originally was they would take a picture at a normal camera exposure. Then they would drop the shutter, the speed down so that the camera stayed open longer, let more light in. And then they would make it so that, so basically they would overexpose the image and then they would underexpose it. So you'd have at least 3 different levels of light, combine them all together. Now, the difference is that in a camera, when you underexpose or overexpose, that information isn't necessarily gone, it's just not visible. But when you combine it together with other layers, you can add to the level of range, for want of a better word. So they used to take a normal exposure, an underexposed, and overexposed image, put them together, and then be able to dial in through the exposure control how bright or how dark you wanted that image to look. Now, that was developed in the 1980s. Okay, mostly NASA, mostly for research, so they could take pictures in space, get all the information, and then bring them in. And they weren't just using it for levels of exposure. On those HDR files, they were doing things like they wanted infrared information, they wanted ultraviolet information, they wanted that camera to be able to record. Remember that big bandwidth of electromagnetic spectrum that we had? They wanted to pick up as much of that as they could visually, you know, visible light, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays. They wanted to be able to record that all in a camera and put it on a file format and then be able to take that file format and say, I just want X-rays, or I just want UVs, or I just want infrared, or I want visible light. And all those really cool pictures that you see from the Hubble telescope are usually those different bits of information layered together and colorized, so that we can see a lot more than we can with our just visual light spectrum. Now, developed in the 80s, didn't really become accessible to us, the consumer, until the mid-1990s when cameras broke the 1 megapixel barrier. Prior to 1990s, like 1990, well, it was early 1990s, like around 1993, because I used to work for a newspaper doing advertising and a magazine, and we got our first digital camera. It was a 10 megapixel camera, and it was $25,000. So it was a big deal at that time. Now, your phones probably have 4 times that ability. You know, there's 40 megapixel, 60 megapixel cameras on your phone. So once consumers were able to break that 1 megapixel barrier, then it became, this high dynamic range format became accessible to us to be able to use. So to give you an idea, it was written in the original C language, which is kind of like the mother of all modern languages. Most of your software is written in some variant of C, C++, C#. It doesn't really matter. Python, Maya's embedded language, Mel is all based off of C or C++. Now, high dynamic range images come in two formats. The original HDR format that was developed in the mid-1980s. The trouble with it is it's not very flexible as far as being able to customize it. It was written for a very specific purpose. It does a really great job. But movie companies in the 1990s, late 1990s, realized that they could utilize it to record information on new digital cinema cameras that were being used, be able to record all that information and not lose anything. But they also wanted to record that information and then be able to access it with information that they wanted. So when you're out there recording, Star Wars, the reboot, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, George Lucas was using Sony's new HD cinematic camera, which was a 2K camera. At the time, that was top of the line. Now, cameras are ridiculous. 8K, 10K cameras. They can do, 10,000 frames a second if you're doing super slow-mo stuff. All digital. But at the time, they wanted to record all the information they could and be able to use it, pull out what they want, use it, and not lose anything in removing information. All right. Sounds a little obtuse, but the reasoning behind it was the best consumer grade video in 2000 that we had was a DVD. A DVD was much better than a tape, a VHS tape, because it was digital and theoretically it didn't degrade. And as long as you didn't scratch the DVD, it read okay. Problem is the format and size of that DVD was only 720 pixels by 486 or 480, 405, depending on whether it was widescreen or kind of squarish aspect ratio. So, when they were shooting Star Wars, Industrial Light and Magic, who came up with the open EXR format, decided that, they were taking a 2K format, downsampling it for consumers. They basically had the original information so that when consumer technology caught up with the film industry, which was basically about 5 years later, Blu-ray started to come out. Blu-ray was basically 2K, 1920 wide by 1080 high. What did they do? Well, you re-release your movies with this new HD format, and magically it doesn't look any worse because they've already shot the movie in 2K. So that's kind of the reasoning they did that. They came up with this EXR. Industrial Light and Magic then made it open source, which means it's open for anybody to use. All you have to do is, just provide any changes you do back to the community so that everybody benefits from it. They made it open source. It became a standard. And basically, that's what most of our CG output is, EXR files. So that's kind of why we use EXR or HDR images. Now, the stuff you get off the internet, mostly for dome lights, are going to be HDR images. There are some places that will provide you with EXRs, but usually those are premium. I'd say you have to pay for those. The free stuff is going to be HDR. Now, mapping an image is actually very simple. Nowadays, pretty much everybody uses this format right here. You go get an HDR image, it looks like this. In the early 2000s, this was very popular. This is called a light probe. It basically looks like you shot your image in a mirror ball. Trouble is, they don't map the same way into a sphere. But fortunately, most CG rendering engines can handle both types. This one is not popular anymore just because it was a big pain to use and the quality wasn't that good. It was basically 2K was tops. Now here you can get 8K, 10K images for free off the internet. So this rectangular image format is called a spherical map. Why? Because it's square, rectangular, and it's mapped automatically to a spherical dome. When you have something that's already mapped spherically, you don't want to map it spherically again to a dome light. You have to do what's called angular, which means it kind of unwraps it for it. It doesn't re-spherize it for the dome light. Now, Arnold can handle both of these. If you ever go and use RenderMan, RenderMan can't handle this at all. Doesn't provide an option for it at all. It only handles this. If you ever use V-Ray, which is a very popular rendering engine also, V-Ray can do either. All engines honestly prefer this. Get these images, you'll have much less trouble on your own. So the only reason I mention is because I have seen some of these floating around on the internet. If you ever see one and they go, oh, free, there's like 10,000 of them. Yeah, don't be, lured into it. They're garbage. I'll be honest. Compared to what you can get now, they're not that good. All right. Let's take a look at some of this stuff in action. Let me clear this. What do I got running here? No, I don't want to have auto update anything right now. Go away. Okay. So actually, before I launch Maya, let's take a look at the assignment for today. So today we're going to be working, as I mentioned, with dome lights, portal lights for interiors. We're going to be doing directional lighting, meaning we're going to have sun, or you're going to have something else like a mesh light. We're still dealing with light direction, light intensity, light color, which is color temperature now, and shadow quality. Those are things that remain no matter what kind of lighting you're doing, whether it's an environment, an object, or a portrait. So we supply both scenes for you down here in the download section. Plus, there is a separate template for the MyComp portion. Because the MyComp only requires one render, doesn't require two. Whereas our templates for the interior and the Zen Garden both have a template that has a long shot on the left and a close-up on the right. All right, now, we've got this laid out sort of like we did for project 4. All right, you're going to choose your environment for the day, either the interior or the exterior, and then you click on the link and that will take you to the appropriate document. Now, for the interiors, day or night, we do not provide the HDR image for you. We send you to HDRI Hub, where you can then download this image. So you might have to highlight it and click on it, because when we saved it, it didn't necessarily go to, there we go. No, I don't want to subscribe. All right, so if you copy the link here, paste it in, it will take you to HDRI Hub, and this is a free image to use. It says free commercial, which means you can make money off of it, in theory. Always read the agreement anywhere you have it. You know, some of them are royalty free, free for non-commercial use, which means you can use them on your demo reel, use them as proof of concept. But if you want to get paid for using it, you need to purchase the actual images, which sometimes it's a one-time purchase. You buy the image, you can use it as many times as you want. Other times, depending on a license agreement, you purchase a usage. So if you want to use it for a client, you pay, well, obviously, if a client is paying you, you factor that into your bill to the client. Never absorb any costs on your own as a freelancer. Always make sure you understand what the client wants, write it down, and then tell them, okay, here's my time, what I think it'll take to do it. Here's all the things we need to get to do your job, like we have to buy royalty images or footage, or we have to pay somebody to go take pictures. Whatever you need, factor that into your final cost. Don't quote one price and then realize that you're on the hook to do all that. Anyway, so you just download. So that'll chug along for a couple of minutes here. While that's chugging along, let me go back. Hopefully that's still going. Yeah, all right. So this document will kind of walk you through all the stuff you need to do. You download your files, decompress them, get the Maya project folder. That's what you set your folder, your project to. All right, open the Maya scene file. You're going to select all the geometry, assign an AI standard material to it, take the base weight, keep it at 1, base color value. This time is going to be lowered to 0.18. Before we were doing 0.5, but now we're going to be throwing a lot more energy at these materials, and we want them to respond a lot more like they would in the real world with real world energy units. Specular weight, just make sure that the weight is 0. We don't want shiny objects in the scene. So really the only difference for you guys is the base color value is going to be different. It's not going to be 0.5, it's going to be 0.18. Make sure color management's on. And we give you a bunch of reference images, which I'll go over in a bit. You download your HDR image. You're going to create a sky dome and start work. So this document's got, like, each step of the way, I've got some images in here. It'll tell you what you're doing. If you have set this scene up for the long shot and the lighting is good, the close-up render is automatic. You're not changing any light for the close-up. The only difference is it is another camera to render from. Now, still going? Yep. Go. Boy, that's slow. All right. So if you're doing the exterior day, you are going to use this document, and we provide the HDR image for you. Why? Because we could walk out back and one of our department chairs had a 360 HDR camera. So his name is Joe Brandibus. We went outside and we shot the Zen Garden environment so that you guys could actually use the same environment that we have at Full Sail. So we provided for you. And you're going to create your dome light, bring the image in, and this is what you're going to get by default, but we have to increase the intensity to make it look like daytime. We add in the sunlight, and then we do a close-up with the stuff, the table setting turned on. Now, whichever one you choose to do for the day, you have to do the opposite environment for the night. So again, if you choose interior day, you have to do exterior night. And there's my HDR images. I'll go over this in a second. If you choose to do the exterior day, you do the interior night. Totally your call. Separate documents. So interior night, we have a separate link, still HDRI hub, but this will take you to kind of a city nighttime environment. Now, this is free also. So just click download. Wow, this one's blazing compared to the last one. Wow, okay, good. Party on. All right, so I got both of those downloaded. Can play around with those later. It's a good website. The reason we give it to you is later on, some of your other classes, you may want environment images, dome lights. So this is a good place to have it. It's free. Make sure you go to the free area. Utilize that. So again, we kind of walk you through each step. That dome light's not going to provide a ton of lighting information. Really going to be super dim through the window. But we've got resets lights in the ceiling. Those are mesh lights. We've got arm lamp lights, TV. We've got a lamp light over in the corner where the desk is. We've got the computer screen. And then if all the lights are good in the long shot, this is the close-up, no light change at all. If you've done it correctly here, this is automatic. It's just like you were in a real environment and then walked over to a new location and took a picture. That's really what it's like. Allegra said, is it possible to make an HDR out of a fantasy landscape like artwork? It would, Allegra, but you would have to do pretty much the same process that you would do for a real environment. You would have to probably, well, let me put it this way. You could do it in Photoshop. You would have to do it with different layers to get the different levels of exposure. But yes, it is possible. As long as you have enough resolution and you have the original file in a uncompressed format. So say you drew your fantasy landscape in Photoshop. If you did it in Photoshop and say you did it 8K, then you'd be able to have a really good high quality HDR. You'd have to make a couple different layers, set the exposures in them. But in theory, yes, you could do that. All right, so let's see, what do we got going here? So here is the exterior night. It's going to be a little bit different. Start with the same dome light, but then we lower the level of the energy or the light exposure. We add in the overhead lights, and we'll get into that in a second. All right, so for the create your own composition, find photo reference of an environment that you want to try to recreate. Use one of the scene files we have. You can use as many lights as needed, but you must use at least a dome light with an HDR image in it in your MyComp. Everything else is the same. The only thing you can't do is model anything. You can rearrange stuff, you can duplicate it, you can scale it, move it around so that the layout suits your reference, but you really can't model or bring anything else in from the outside. Now, for the MyComp, you're going to use the MyComp template. Right, let me show you guys what all the downloads look like, just to make sure there's no confusion. So your interior download will look like this. SAO interior. Okay, it's going to give you the Maya project folder. It's going to give you the Photoshop templates. Now, for example, here, let me open this up with Photoshop. So this is our interior. And you say to yourself, well, I wanted to do the exterior day, but not the interior day. I want to do interior night. Well, that's just on a different layer. So the reference is there. You just turn off the day reference and there's your night. So your long shot goes on the left. Your close-up goes on the right. Don't forget, change the watermark opacity to 15% and just put in the right reference. So the Zen Garden, kind of the same thing. Project folder. For the Zen Garden, we've got two different scene files because the daytime version of the Zen Garden table setting does not have candles. It's not night. You don't need candles. The nighttime version has candles. So you need to open the appropriate file. And here is the Zen Garden image that we have. And there's Joe and I hiding behind the dumpster so that you can't see us, so that we could get this HDR image. Now, it looks kind of weird, but when you put it in a dome light, it looks perfectly natural. And you won't even see the stand that the camera is on, because basically we're going to cover it with the ground. All right, now, as far as the templates go, same kind of deal. The difference is this aspect ratio was more square than the standard HD 540. This is I think it's 816 by 612 is the format. It's kind of a square aspect ratio. It's basically the format that I had on my phone when I took the picture. I wanted to frame it up for that because that was, got rid of a whole bunch of other stuff we didn't have to worry about. All right, so you got your different reference layers. Make sure you've got them. The correct one turned on. Now for the MyComp, you've got a choice of two. So here is the aspect ratio if you choose to use the exterior scene for your composition. Right? It's 816 wide, 612 high. If you choose to use the interior scene, then you're going to do the HD 540. So whichever aspect ratio you want to use, and there's, you drop your reference in the top and put your render in at the bottom. All right, let's see. All right, let's get into the reference. So for the reference, we're going to give you guys breakdowns. So for example, the interior, we've got daytime reference, we've got nighttime reference. Choose the appropriate one, obviously. So for the interior, this is going to be a little bit different. The interior daytime, we use a double dome light system. So sounds a little weird, but the problem is with a single dome light is when you adjust the level of intensity for the light, the image inside the dome light gets brighter also. So what happens is if you adjust it to get the level of light you want, it will blow out the outside image too much. So we use two dome lights. The first one is non-visible. This provides the energy for ambient light coming in through the window. So it gets the correct level of light. Now we're using portal lights here because there's so much energy coming in, this scene would be filled with noise. And it would take a lot of samples and a lot more denoise time. It's a lot more efficient to use portal lights to funnel all that dome light energy, even though the dome light's not visible to the camera. So we turn that off. Now, the second dome light is visibility only. There's no portals. It just provides us with the image outside the window. Now, this is the default intensity of the image outside the window. It's also got to be rotated a little, so this is set up for rotation. In the dome light, the visible dome light, we adjust the outside, or we adjust that visible dome light energy to get the look we want, which is this. Now, if we were to put this image in here, it would be sheer white. You wouldn't see it. So this provides us with some sunlight. You can see got a little bit of a sunlight pattern here, but not enough. So we add in a directional light on top of it in the same position. And now we've got a believable looking environment. Looks very similar to the two interior environments we looked at in the slides. The one I did in my family room, and then one we looked at in was kind of a open air bedroom. Now we give you reference for the close-up, just so you know, like if you have your scene looking good here for the final, this is what your close-up will look like automatically. So again, these breakdowns should help you see what each part is doing. Remember, lighting's additive. So this energy adds in to this energy, and then this is additive on top of it. So I'll give you a couple what I call positional guides. They'll kind of show you the diagram of where the portals go and where the directional light is, kind of give you an idea of the rotation of the light too. So you get an idea. Now for the nighttime, it's going to be a little simpler. We don't need two dome lights because we're not worrying about sunlight coming in. The dome light is not really providing a ton of light. So what we have is a single dome light with portals and an image all in one. So this is for the rotation of the dome light. We want that lamp light to be visible in the right window. But the level of light that should be visible is about that much. And then we add in our interior light. Now, the reason we don't want it to look like this is because with all the lights on in the house, it's going to kind of negate what's coming in through the windows, which you can see. All the reflectivity is going to be inside. You're not going to see much of it. So this is recessed ceiling lights, plus the lamp lights, plus the TV, plus the desk light, plus the computer. So your mesh lights are driving, I would say, 98% of your light. You know, maybe 2% is this. It's really dim. You can see it a little bit when you're looking at the render on your computer, but all this stuff adds up. And then your close-up looks like this. And again, same set of positional guides. The only difference is there's no directional light here. All right, so for the Zen garden, we give you 3 sets of reference. This is the actual photo reference I gave to Frank to model the environment from. Kind of make it smaller. There we go. All right, so just so he had an idea of what it looked like from the sides, this is the actual shot we used for the daytime. Now, of course, we chose not to model the tree because that's really not what we're worried about. We're worried about lighting, and then later on, materials and textures. So this is behind building 4D. This is the Zen garden. So I highly encourage you, go take a walk over there sometime, go in the back, take a look at it, take pictures, use these images if you want as reference also. And this is where my office is, right here, this little gray the gray doorway. So our offices are here right next to the really nice office. Now, the reason I provide you with this is because this is what the overhead lights look like. I don't think you can see them. They're actually kind of hidden by this beam. It's a really bright halogen light that provides a lot of light at night. And while we weren't able to do an HDR image, we did get a panoramic at night of our environment. So the only night we had the panoramic camera, it rained, so we had to run out in between the raindrops and take a look. But let me open this up in preview. There we go. Okay. So here is that great big bright halogen light. Now you'll notice that there are little lights down on the ground that kind of shoot up at the trees. So this light kind of acts like a lower backlight behind the camera, because this is the main part of our nighttime scene here. So we've got tree lights on the sides. There's actually one on the right also. And that provides us with the reference that I use to do the nighttime lighting. So you can kind of see how our Zen garden looks at night. All right, so daytime reference, pretty simple. Simple dome light. There is no double dome light system. There's no portals. It's open. So daytime, you're going to have to rotate the dome light image in X, Y, and Z. So this way, this is Y, and then Z is going to be back and forth, just to get the right aspect ratio. Because while we did put the camera on the ground and had it level, I had the camera slightly tilted to get this camera view. So this is the level of intensity you need in that dome light. And then you add in your sun. Then all you have to do is turn on the display layer for the close-up, and your shadows should match. You know, they may be like 98% here, but in the close-up, you can kind of fine-tune them to get the shadows on the table. It'll make it a little easier to adjust to kind of fine-tune the directional light. And a couple of positional guides, you get an idea of the rotation of the sun. All right, for the nighttime, it's going to be a little different. Dome light, yes, same dome light, same rotation. Difference, less energy. So you're just lowering the intensity of the dome light. You can see a little bit of silhouette up here. Really kind of hard to see, but it's there. Then this is that big bright overhead halogen light. And then this is the lower tree light behind the camera. And then we have a little light off to the left that represents the tree that's over on the left. There's one on the right also. That just represents the framework of the kind of light that you get normally in the Zen garden. And then because we're doing a close-up, we have a table setting, we have candles. And the candles provide a different kind of light energy, light color into the environment. And again, some positional guides so you guys get an idea of here's the big overhead light, overhead off to the left. And you can see that it's raised up pretty high because it literally, it's like 10, 15 feet off the ground. There's the tree light, there's the other tree lights. And we're just using a couple of area lights and a couple of point lights to represent the bare light bulbs for the trees. All right, so that's kind of an overview of everything we're going to be doing. This is a good chance. We'll take a break. I'll render out the first part of lecture. And when I come back, we'll actually go in and talk about using the dome light, talking about the portals. I'll try and demo, I think I'll do the exterior day and the interior night. That'll give me a chance to demo exterior without portals, and then the interior with the mesh lights, because there's a lot more mesh lights in the interior at night. Can we also see examples of my comp? Oh, yes, good. Thank you, Allegra. I have them right here. Here we go. All right, so a couple examples. So just remember, you're capturing the look and feel. They did a pretty good job getting the color temperature of that light. We talked about warm and cool. There's your warm color temperature. Like highly stylized, but still it's there. Let's see if I can make this a little smaller. Come on, come back here. There we go. Just so we can see the whole thing. So there's your cool color temperature. Again, very simple, or it can be complicated. So hopefully that helps a little bit. You get an idea, you can have fun with it. You can be simple, you can be complicated. Should these be photographic reference? Yes, they should. Now, some of the earlier ones that you saw were probably CG or concept art. We've kind of refined it to photo reference. In fact, I think I have that in the directions. Yes, photo reference. So that's what we want. Only reason I'm really being stickler with that is because if you get to do an art test for somebody, most of the time it's going to be a photo. You might, depending on what you're applying for, get concept art, but usually they're interested in seeing how well you can actually mimic a photo, because if you can do a photo, you can do concept art. So Excellent question. Can it be a screen capture from a video game, or are we sticking to real life environments? Let me put it this way, El. If the screen grab is from a photorealistic, not stylized video game, yes, you can do that. I'd just rather not get into the stylized area, because that we could do a whole class in doing stylized look development, lighting, materials, textures. So yeah, good question. Thank you. Can we change the lighting in this one? Allegra, you are responsible for the entire lighting. You must use a dome light. You can use as many lights as you want, but you must use at least a dome light. The only thing you can't do, Allegra, is model anything or bring something in from another scene. But total lighting is all you. Excellent questions. Any others before we take a break? All right. Damien, any questions? Gaia, questions? Adriana, Jasmine, Griffin, Elle, Diamond, Allegra, any questions before we take a break? Griffin's good, Diamond's good, Jasmine's good, thank you. Allegra, good. All right, so let's take a break. We'll come back at, what time is it? 4. So let's come back at 9:18. Come back at 9:18 and we'll pick up, we'll do some demos and hopefully get everything wrapped up so you guys can get started when you hit lab today. All right, so I'll see you back here at 9:18.